When I look at you, I see me. I see all the problems I've had to go through. Your genius stretches beyond infinity, and I'm awestruck by everything you've managed to do.
Infinity freaking Train. From the moment this premiered. No, from the moment the short was released. No, from the moment it was conceived. No, from the moment trains were invented. This thing was destined to be loved. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Cartoon Network Studio shorts. You know those little animations on the CN YouTube channel that are like self-contained pilots for TV shows? They range from top-notch to pretty dang sweet to averagely average to please kill me to never mind I'm already dead. But out of all of these, Infinity Train, even to this day, is still the undisputed champion, weighing in at 5.4 million views since its release in 2016. People were singing its praises all over the internet. The fantastic concept just exploding with imagination. The seamless blend of atmosphere, mystery, and comedy. And the door of potential for a full series was open so wide that you could drive a truck through it. So they did. During the week of August 5th, 2019, we got Infinity Train Book 1, The Perennial Child. It was only intended to be a miniseries at first, and Dennis only asked for 10 episodes to tell the story that he wanted. But in the end, the network actually ordered double that amount, giving him 20 episodes to work with. And those remaining 10 were eventually shaped into Book 2, Cracked Reflection, which came out a few months later. And if my enthusiasm didn't tip you off, I got completely hooked on this series. Phenomenal characters elevated by excellent writing and super distinct voice acting. Rock solid comedy coming not from random cartoon antics, but from charming character interactions and banter. Cars upon cars of creative possibilities, leading to infinite imagination, pun intended. Stories that played out like illustrative therapy sessions, letting us dive into characters' problems in subtle and metaphorical ways, and even asking some of life's toughest and most relatable questions. How to deal with things that are out of your control, knowing when it's fair to blame yourself and knowing when there's nothing you could have done. What it truly means to be your own individual, where the line is between what's real and what's not, and how that line can be blurred so easily. How come I never thought to use a pipe as a donut hole punch? What's Hypnotoad been up to since Futurama was cancelled? And while I'm not sure where I would place it on my favorite cartoons of all time list, Infinity Train has impressed me and endeared me so many times that it would be impossible for me to not scream its praises from the mountaintops.
Infinity Train is amazing! What?
But tonight we have a very strange case, and it comes in the form of Book 3, The Cult of the Conductor. This is arguably the best season of the show so far, not gonna lie, but based on certain bits of evidence, it's possible that it'll also be the last. A short while ago on Instagram, a crew member leaked the Infinity Train crew yearbook, implying that the show has likely been cancelled, but emphasis on implying, because this doesn't confirm anything. I say it's not over until the fat creator sings, and Owen Dennis still hasn't said anything about the official cancellation yet. But seeing as how the crew has moved on to other projects, and there's been no word of a revival since the third season ended in mid-2020, I'm not too sure if this series is going to be coming back. And this is extra depressing because Owen Dennis has had plenty of ideas for new seasons for the show, not to mention a full-fledged movie and even comic book side stories akin to those made for MLP, Avatar, or Adventure Time. This man has got concepts to spare. But the future of the show, like all shows, rests on more than just the creator's ambitions. And unfortunately, Infinity Train has been in a really awkward spot for a long time. From the beginning, Infinity Train was marketed as a kids show, when in reality, Owen Dennis was aiming for a more young adult to teen demographic, similar to Steven Universe, Adventure Time, or Kippo and the Age of Wonder Beasts. And I will admit, despite being branded as a kids show, the crew really stretched those limitations as far as they could go in terms of writing, imagery, and content. However, when Mr. Dennis tried to pitch ideas for Season 4 and beyond, this is when the higher-ups started to get scared. They felt that certain things like the subject matter, the ages of the cast, and certain character conflicts just won't click with the kids watching. I know it's customary for people to point fingers and say, "Through the higher-ups and that to kill creativity." But I'm not going to do that, because I get it. When you're a company, you gotta make money. You make money by having people watch your programs, and you get people to watch your programs by focusing on stuff that works for the demographic you're aiming for. And it was shown in the ratings that Infinity Train's viewership consisted mainly of kids, which makes sense because it was marketed as a kids show. Meanwhile, the teen and young adult viewership was apparently very low for the series at the time, meaning there was no real evidence to prove that the show was appealing to a much wider demographic. So if it's mainly kids watching and the big boys don't think Owen's plans will appeal to kids, they're not going to pick him back up and there's not much you can do about it. So the obvious answer would be to boost the numbers and ratings for the young adult and teen demographics. Show the bigwigs that a much older audience is interested in the show, and then maybe they could remove the kid branding and allow for more mature themes to show up in future seasons. And I'll be honest, no exaggeration here, the young adult fanbase for this show is one of the most dedicated fan bases for a cartoon I've ever seen. They did everything they could to try and bring this show back, not just by telling people to watch it, not just by making content showcasing it, not just by compiling evidence to prove that the show is more loved than the executives assumed, but there were entire movements for this show. Dedicated group efforts to spread the word of the show and hopefully make their love for it as crystal clear as possible. Petitions with thousands of signatures, getting the show trending on Twitter multiple times a month. I even distinctly remember a period where fans of the show took pictures of them as kids and drew the apex marking on their face to use as their Twitter profile pic. These guys just never gave up on this show. But even with all that, I guess no one took notice because the show is still hanging by a thread to this day. I feel really guilty that I didn't talk about this show back then, mainly because I was just so preoccupied with other things, but I'm hoping to make up for lost time right now with this video. I want to take as much time and effort as possible to show you all why I think Infinity Train, especially the third season, is a genuine masterpiece. Why it deserves the ironically cult-like following it got, and why the higher-ups really should have reconsidered their stance on the show's future and staying power. Keep in mind that this review does contain some light spoilers for the first few episodes of Book 3 and Infinity Train as a whole, as well as a huge chunk of heavy spoilers later on, but I'll be sure to mark that point in the video so you can skip to the conclusion. Cause trust me, one of the best aspects of this show is its twists and turns, and I wouldn't want to ruin those for you. So yeah, take your seats and let's get rolling. If you've never seen Infinity Train before, here's a quick synopsis. There's this giant, ever-moving train in the middle of scenic nowhere. When someone's facing some kind of crisis in their life, like coping with loss or failing to make good decisions, the train makes a stop and picks them up. That person is then processed and tagged with a glowing number on their hand. Then once they awaken, they're sent to a specially fashioned gauntlet of puzzles and trials that cater specifically to the problems they're having. If they get closer to solving their problem, the number goes down. If they stray from the path the train has set for them, their number goes back up. And once it reaches 0, they're free to go. Now with a new outlook on life and the newly gained knowledge they need to live life to the fullest. Sounds like a pretty good system on paper. But every season slowly starts to show the cracks in this concept and the ways that this train of infinite wisdom and capabilities is actually more finite than the creators thought. Hostile takeovers and reconstruction by passengers, fabricated beings gaining too much intelligence for their own good, and the subject of the third book, a cult of kids raiding various cars like pirates, worshipping a false idol, and even adorning their faces with the markings of said idol. And they said this wouldn't relate to kids. Cults were all the rage with kids back in the 90s, they even had theme songs. Come along, you belong, feel the feels of Coca-Cola. Disclaimer, this channel does not endorse the joining of cults, but we do endorse the catchiness of that song and the awesomeness of Chippendale's Rescue Rangers. Back to the show. And they waste no time showing you exactly what you're in for when you watch this season. First we see our two main leads, Grace and Simon, setting up for a raid with their fellow Apex members, putting on armor, nailing up baseball bats in a destroyed and raided mall, all while an innocent chipper song about acceptance is playing in the background. And when they finally get to the car where the song is being performed, they completely tear apart all the performers, set fire to the stage, and then leave with smiles on their faces. Talk about a major juxtaposition. The opening few minutes perfectly set the tone of the season, where 90% of the time, what you expect to happen is not gonna happen. Things will change from happy to dismal at the flip of a coin. Events will happen that you never see coming, and once the damage is done, it ain't gonna be magically fixed. They're just gonna leave you in a burning room to pick up the pieces of your shattered emotions. All aboard the frickin' Infinity Train. And that's not all. After all that carnage and destruction, the very next thing the show does is try to endear you to these characters. Yeah, the duo that just did this a minute ago. And now we're supposed to want to follow them as protagonists? And the strangest part, it actually worked. I mean, I still hate what they did to those poor denizens, but just from the first half of this episode, they shroud these characters and their whole society in such an intriguing aura of mystery. I really wanted to know exactly how the Apex came to be. What were the defining events that led to its creation? And most importantly, what are we going to learn about its two main leaders? As someone who's been watching TV his whole life, I've noticed that characters who begin as cold, harsh, aggressive, or destructive tend to have some of the most juicy character reveals and developments in many shows. And whether they get redeemed or defeated, the drama bombs that drop as the show sheds more light on them tend to be fantastic. And trust me, we'll talk about those bombs in more detail later on, because they hit pretty dang hard. And on top of that, Grace and Simon start off by having good chemistry. Like really good chemistry. Despite being a pair of destructive thugs, I was absolutely digging their little small talk, references to fun times they had together, exchanging insults about what they're wearing, and even cute little quirks, like Simon begging his friend to read his fantasy novel that he works so hard on. I totally feel you there, bro. And Grace making this little horse noise whenever she's frustrated or exhausted. You know, the one that goes... I never expected to be calling these characters cute, especially after what they just did. Yet another great example of the unexpected happenings that come out of this show. But trust me, these characters go far beyond just playful banter, and once they get separated from their group, their true story begins. When you have a series where the core concept is people getting on a train and dealing with internal issues, the characters are the aspect that is going to drive your show, either straight down the track or straight into the dirt, depending on how you use them. We already have 2 seasons worth of memorable faces, including Bucks, Corgis, and the love child of Wheatley and Marvin the Robot, but Book 3 offers a trifecta of awesomeness that are not only great characters on their own, but together form a 3-piece structure that helps to explore one of the show's biggest themes, the blurred line between what's real and what's not. Hazel, for example, is the childlike innocent of the group. To her, if something can be seen, touched, felt, hugged, or spoken to, it's real and deserves to be treated like a real person. From the denizen she encounters in each car, to her big, strong gorilla caretaker Tuba. To her, there is no line between what's real and what's not. She doesn't distinguish fact from fiction because she's never been given a reason to. To her, these things have emotions, feelings, friendships, and backstories, so she's always willing to listen to them, and even convince others to try and get to know them. She acts as a much-needed air of wide-eyed trust to the group, and I love that. As a kid character, she's written pretty convincingly. She's optimistic, but knows when to take things seriously. She can be swayed easily with the right words, but she's far from an idiot, and sometimes she can even make sense of a situation that our 2 Apex legends completely overlook. And yes, without question, she is cute. So cute. Like, if this design didn't already make you want to break out the insulin, her behavior and voice will easily get the job done. Simon, meanwhile, is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, having a total unwavering grasp on what's real and what's not. He follows Apex doctrine to a T, and he knows for a fact that the denizens and the cars were created for the use of the passengers. All those feelings and origins and whatnot were just programmed in to make the experience more personal. So hey, if the train is made for them, then so are the denizens. And if he wants to fight one, or herd one, or mess with one, he's gonna do it. They don't really exist, so who cares? But while he can have some heartless moments in the series, the creators still do a good job of showing you how he got to this point in the first place. I won't go into specifics yet, but what we see of Simon's life has been nothing but lies. He has deeply rooted trust issues that stem from the important ones in his life betraying him. What he trusted to be truths always end up being fabricated lies. So it makes complete sense as to why his perspective on the train wouldn't really waver, regardless of what kind of denizens he interacts with. He isn't going to stand for dishonesty anymore. Not from the train, not from its occupants, not even from real people. And when you ultimately see what he becomes, it's unfortunate but not at all surprising, because you were there to witness every step of his transformation. And then there's Grace. To sum up Grace's character, she gradually walks the tightrope suspended by both extremes, going from one side to the other, but midway through, both of her supports give way, she's forced to take a fall, and once she recovers, she has to carve out a new path and decide where to go from there. At the very beginning, she pretty much has the same mindset as Simon. The train is ours for the taking. You can never trust a no. Yo ho, got lipstick on my face. Heck, she could even be seen as worse than Simon because she's the one that created all these rules and beliefs that Simon follows. But once she's separated from the group and meets up with Hazel and Tuba, we see every single step of her development. Her playful and lax personality about the train and her close kinship with Simon slowly start to fade away, in favor of a more serious attitude towards the situation and her new travel buddies. We see all her old tendencies and abilities start to reshape. Her fake concern and manipulation of her inferiors grows into a more genuine motherly concern and affection when she gets to know Hazel. Her apex training and skills go from mostly self-serving to serving others, going from a raider after a high number to a strict protector of others both physically and emotionally. When we find out exactly who Hazel is, which again, won't spoil, it's revealed what all of these real emotions were caused by, what all this real love she has was directed towards, and it's a massive eye-opener for her. And when she has her big character realization in the final episode, it puts everything into perspective and acts as the final step to true self-improvement. She's easily the most dynamic character in the story, and easily my favorite of the trio. Also, she's a great dancer, so that's really cool.
No.
The rest of the side characters serve their purpose, whether it be for laughs, drama, or references. And familiar faces from the past seasons just add to this show's airtight continuity. Heck, some of them, like Samantha, even have relationships and backstories that I never saw coming, and it makes them even more intriguing than they already were. And of course you can't forget Randall. I'll admit he's not as good as Randall, but hey, he definitely gives Randall a run for his money in the development department. Though I will admit that Randall's acting was a little bit off. He should really take a page out of Randall's book. Just my thoughts. Again, it's so hard to talk about how great the cast is without ruining most of the show, but these characters did more for me in 10 episodes than most characters do in multiple seasons. They have the charm that makes me want to follow them, the depth that makes me want to study them, and more than anything, the feels that make me want to cry with them. And yeah, I did cry. A lot. And I'm not ashamed to admit that because these creators earned those tears with how well this stuff is written. However, I can't exactly give all the credit to just the characters. There are plenty of other aspects that manage to squeeze emotion out of you. Segway. The Infinity Train is a massive locomotive with tons of distinct cars, all with their own settings and occupants. And considering that the protagonists visit a new one every episode, there's a lot of pressure on the art and sound department to create a fitting and effective atmosphere for all of them. But as usual, A+ efforts here. Not only is every single car so distinct just by concept alone, but they all have unique feels to them. Look at the Cat Chalet car, for example. The warm orange and yellow color palette, the sound of crackling fire in the background, the more confined space, the way the characters are mostly clearly lit as opposed to the subtle blue tint they had when they were outside, and this manages to be effective regardless of what scene is playing out. It gives off a warm and cozy vibe when you see all your favorite characters come together and relax, and when some arguments start to flare up, it can make you feel really claustrophobic and nervous, and is it getting cramped in here or is it just me? It works both ways. And if that wasn't cool enough, the episode does a complete 180 of the atmosphere at one point, and it still works. Simon wanders into Samantha's collection room at one point, the orange palette gets swapped out for blue, creepy music starts to swell, and suddenly this warm and inviting cabin becomes a cold-feeling room full of unpleasant memories, both the tragic and the terrifying. And you feel every scared breath that Simon takes as he's forced to soak it all in. Just fantastic. 11 minutes, and you've successfully conveyed 3 tones in the same small location that all work wonders. Amazing. Then there are locations like the Jungle Car, where you get the feel of the place before they even step inside. As soon as Grace opens the door, this is what you're greeted with. It looks like some kind of impressionist painting that you'd find hanging on the wall of an art museum, instead of just any normal jungle background in any other cartoon. The general theme I get from this car is creativity, like how each object lights up when you touch it, mirroring how you can get creative ideas from literally anywhere. And of course they meet Hazel in this car, who's the embodiment of childlike imagination. So to have the car be presented like a painting before they even enter does a great job to set the mood of the episode right from the start. And dare I even mention the moments that come between cars? These are often the most drama and tension-heavy moments in the series, and to have them set outside the safety of the train with literal nothingness right below them is super effective for tension. I mean, swapping cars while a train is moving is already an uncomfortable experience, but having the cars be so far apart with bridges that barely give you any walking space during moments where emotions are high and characters are mad at each other and there's nothing but toothpick guardrails keeping you from falling into the dry, endless desert of the unknown and the dark, soul-sucking monsters within it? Yep, I think I've said all I need to. It just makes moments like these even more impactful than they already are. There's only one atmospheric moment that I can't talk about. It's actually my favorite moment in the whole show, but it's also a huge spoiler, so I'm gonna save it for the next car. Bottom line, all y'all that worked on the art, animation, and sound for this show deserve a big hand. You are the feels professionals, and you always set the mood perfectly. Sometimes a little too well, in fact. Ugh. And now let's cap things off with my favorite part about this show, the themes. And this is the portion which contains the massive spoilers I talked about. If you haven't seen the show, all you need to know is that there are plenty of hidden meanings, morals, and metaphors that can be interpreted in different ways by different people. This is a thinking man's cartoon. So if you enjoy breaking down shows and appreciating them like me, you're gonna fall in love with what's in store for you here. So if you don't want any of that spoiled, skip to this point to go right to the conclusion. If you already saw it and you just want to hear what I picked up, then let's do this. We'll start with the theme that I touched on in the character car, the line between what's real and what's not. This, along with the next theme, perfectly show just how widespread of an audience this show deserves, because anyone can relate to this idea, in ways you wouldn't even expect. For teens and young adults, I imagine that as they get older, they start to look deeper into the media they consume, seeing both touches and flaws that they never realized when they first watched things as kids. Heck, people make bank off of those jokes and references you missed as kids compilations on YouTube for a reason. And for them, the distinction between what's real and what's not becomes a lot more complex than just, that is a real person and that is a fictional character. Yes, the characters and the worlds in our favorite shows and movies aren't real, we know that for fact, but the memories we shared with said characters are very much real. The struggles we've gone through that mirror theirs are real. The tears we've cried at their pain is real. The laughs we've had with them are real. And the lessons we've learned alongside them are real. Factually, these characters are fake, but the impacts they've had on us stir up real emotions and thoughts inside all of us. And that concept is an exact mirror of the denizens in this show. The characters know that they're just programs made for the passengers' benefit, but that doesn't make the emotions they invoked in them and the lessons they helped them learn any less real. So in some sense, these fabricated entities can be seen as real, depending on your perspective, blurring the line even further. For older adults, this idea gets studied even further in tons of movies and shows. Heck, one of the first shows I binged last year during quarantine was Westworld, which I highly recommend if you like gritty mystery dramas. The fact that the robotic hosts were designed to have real human emotions constantly makes you question reality. Which of these emotions are really feelings, and which of these are just lines of code? Which actions are freely chosen, and which ones were just part of the puppet master's ultimate plan? So seeing a concept like this in a general audience cartoon is something they'll not only relate to, but really respect for its ambition. I know I do. Even kids in a way can relate to this, despite what the CEOs try to tell you. I mean, yeah, most of us go through childhood believing in things that don't exist, similar to Hazel in the series, but there are times when we do need to start realizing what actually exists and what's just fantasy. When kids get to a certain age, parents need to have the talk with them about how Santa Claus isn't real, or the Easter Bunny isn't real, or a certain fictional character isn't real. It's not a fun part of life, but it's a part that needs to happen to all of us, including kids. So I could totally see kids getting something out of this too. Still don't believe me? Well, let's look at the next theme, which literally anyone of any age can relate to: losing a loved one. Yeah, you know what's coming. One of the biggest shocking moments of the series. Tuba dies in Infinity War. Tuba dies in episode 5. Yup, Hazel's denizen mama, who took care of her for who knows how long, is killed off by Simon. And this is permanent too. No fake outs or magical resurrections. Nah, she's just dead. Not only does this take a lot of guts to do, but it also makes for probably the best moment in Book 3, which is a very high bar. In episode 6, The Campfire Car, Hazel says that she wants to hold a funeral for Tuba. With no body to bury, she decides to use the rock from the jungle car that Tuba kept in her bag, a literal gravestone in her honor. They take the rock to the top of a tree, so Tuba will always be able to see the sky. Hazel gives a little eulogy and even encourages Grace to join in. And while Grace talks about Tuba, she actually starts to tear up. She shows real emotion and longing for a being that she once called a no, a nothing, showing how far she's come in just a few episodes. Then Hazel sings the lullaby that her and Tuba were singing throughout the episode, including the verse that she added at the end. And all throughout the scene, we just get silence. No background music to try and squeeze the emotions out of you, just silence to let the emotions flow out naturally. We even see 3 baby birds fly away as the mama bird struggles to follow them, probably showing that Tuba was going through the exact same pain when her kids died. She may have even sung the exact same song. The sun rises, they place the stone in the tree, and it stops glowing, showing that Hazel has mourned and is ready to move on. But she'll always remember her adoptive mother. And then, not a dry eye in the room. So yeah, you look me in the eye and tell me that there are people who can't relate to something like this. Doesn't matter if you're 8 or 80, people you love can be taken away from you when you least expect it. And it's good to have media like this which shows that it's healthy to grieve. Heck, I almost lost my mom when I was 7. And if God forbid that happened, I would have really appreciated shows like this with characters that were going through the exact same pain I was. And I guarantee other kids will appreciate it too. Alright, we're all good? Alright, let's dry the eyes and keep on going. Now let's talk about the guy who actually threw Tuba under the bus. Or train. Simon Laurent. Like I said before, the show managed to perfectly balance this character between being hateable and being sympathetic. We not only see every step of his transformation from right-hand guy to the value of pi, but we also completely understand what sent him over the edge. He was dropped into this strange place that he didn't understand. The people he trusted like Samantha just left him for dead. And for all we know, his life before the train probably included much of the same. But then he met Grace, who was his one grounding element in a world of unsteadiness and uncertainty. Grace was real and true, and he believed that everything she said was real and true, which explains why he followed Apex Dogma pretty much to a T. But then...
We just won't tell Simon, okay? He doesn't need to know.
Oh boy. What seems like an inconsiderate but minor lie to us is the breaking point for Simon. I mean, think about it. The one person he thought he could trust just proved that she couldn't be trusted either. And right behind his back, he doesn't know what to believe in anymore. His grounding rope has been cut, and now the balloon is just being wildly pushed around by the wind. How does he know who's gonna lie to him next? If Hazel was a turtle Dennison thing the whole time, how is he ever gonna know what's real and what's not anymore? And thus, we pretty much see him descend into madness. And that's not an exaggeration. Look at this guy. By the end of the series, I was deeply impressed by how many layers they were able to add to Simon's character. Every choice he makes and every turn his character takes is completely believable based on what we see. But now comes the big question that a lot of people were asking. Was Simon irredeemable? Yes, he was. But not solely in the way you'd expect. You see, when most people peg fictional characters as irredeemable, it's by their own standards of what that means. Maybe they destroyed a city, or enslaved an entire people, or killed many innocents, or even a combination of things. And because of those actions, that person is beyond saving in someone's eyes. But in reality, a character being irredeemable is very dependent on the kind of story you're writing. Things like context, tone, world, execution, all of these things could give different meaning to the same action. There is no universal definition of irredeemable when it comes to fiction, because every story has different elements that you need to consider. And looking at the more small-scale, character-based format of Infinity Train, I could totally see people considering Simon to be irredeemable based on what he's done. But his actions are not the only factor here. The main reason why Simon is objectively irredeemable here is because he refuses to be redeemed. Simon is a relentless, immobile wall that is deeply rooted in his own stubborn way of thinking, and no matter how many chances Grace or Hazel or the train give him, he refuses to take any steps forward himself. Regardless of the actions of an individual, being open and willing to change is the first step of self-improvement, and Simon never even bothered to crack open the door a little bit. You understand why he's like this, but there's really no chance of him changing for the better if he doesn't put in the effort. Which leads to another theme that the show does really well, redemption and second chances. We've seen redemptions in cartoons all the time. Some do it well, some do it poorly, some do both at the same time, but Infinity Train presents the harsh, sad truth that sometimes a person can be a lost cause. I hate to say it, but there are people out there that are too far gone. People that'll take forgiveness for granted, or in Simon's case, people that can't and won't listen to reason. And sometimes giving people too many chances can just lead to pain for all the parties involved. The Infinity Train is literally a train of infinite chances. When someone does something incredibly cruel or heinous, all the train does is give them more chances to fix it. Heck, the amount of chances the train gave Simon is literally written all over his body. And what seems like a kind and compassionate thing to do on paper actually makes things way worse for Simon. When you forgive someone too many times, it creates a sense of normalcy. When it comes to your relationship, they start to believe that there's no risk, there's no loss, there's no consequences for their actions because, who cares, they're just gonna forgive me again. Why do you think the Apex saw their numbers as a sign of power? Because when they do something awful, all it does is go up. They don't get kicked off the train or sent to some kind of jail car. Nope, no repercussions or anything. And it leads to people never learning or bettering themselves because there's no real drive to. Everything to gain and nothing to lose. Simon was given more chances than any passenger I've ever seen, and it pretty much drove him to the brink of insanity. That shows better than words how dangerous it is to be too forgiving with someone, and what kind of damage it can cause. There's also a takeaway with Grace. In the final episodes, she gave Simon plenty of chances to hear her out and change his mind, but he turned down every single one without even thinking about it. Even after she says that she's not responsible for Simon and she doesn't owe him anything, which is true, she still does save him one last time. And when Simon asks her why she did that for him, she says, "I don't know." And guess what happens? Simon kicks her right off the train. Yup, if not for her origami birdie buddies, Grace would have been dead. Again, you can't just haphazardly throw forgiveness around with no real reasoning, because not only will that person get hurt because of it, but you will too. I know this example might be a little extreme because this second chance is literally life or death, but metaphorically, it does show that the person doing the forgiving can suffer just as much as the person being forgiven, if the second chances are laid on too thick. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I'm some kind of almighty master of forgiveness, because just like in fiction, I know there are variables in real life too. There are tons of different people from different places with different stories and different conditions. That's why it's up to you as their loved one to make the judgment call. Give them the second chance when you feel they earned them, and they consciously make an effort to change. But also know when to draw the line. Don't just give out forgiveness like free candy, or you risk making things worse for them and worse for you. And finally, let's talk about a theme that could easily be explored in later seasons if they ever happen, the fact that there's no single system that can fix everyone's problems. When you think about it really hard, the Infinity Train is kind of messed up. You're forced onto this train, probably against your will, and told to follow a custom-made path that they made for you and they think is the surefire way to fix your personal issues. And you're not allowed to leave until you play exactly by their rules, because in their eyes, you're not fixed and not fit to move on with your life until your number reaches 0. Like, geez, at least the Polar Express gave you the option to say no before you got on. But the more seasons go by, the more we see that this seemingly perfect system isn't all it's cracked up to be. Look, I don't know if this train was made by aliens or time travelers or ultimate gods of perfection or whatever. The one inescapable truth is that there is no one-size-fits-all path to personal growth. There is no one single organized system that can fix the problems of every person. All people are gonna learn life lessons and change as individuals in different ways. Some through therapy, some through support groups, some through normal life experience, and some even through loss and tragedy. Heck, there are some systems that might not even work at all and can even be more harmful than good, and this show knows this. Even though the show is called Infinity Train, and there are notable things that happen in the cars, there are plenty of instances in the show where important character growth happens without the train's guidance. There are conversations and events that happen in between cars, like on the bridge or even as the cars are switching. There's growth that happens completely off the train in the desert area that surrounds it. There are big moments that happen in the inner workings of the train where no conscious passenger is supposed to be. And there are even instances where being on the train actually makes a passenger way worse than when they got on. Need I mention Simon again? I didn't think so. As much as the train seems to think it's got personal growth down to a science, the truth is that life doesn't work that way. Personal growth is complex and diverse, and sometimes it takes multiple systems and even outside forces to truly get good results. In the end, we all have different stories about how we became the person we are today, and that's okay. I know this theme isn't as prevalent as the others I talked about, but if this show does get more seasons, I really want to see it explored more. I want to see who made this locomotive and what their thought process was. It would be interesting to see how the cracks in the system start to tear the whole thing apart, similar to the Candy Kingdom in Adventure Time. I think it could make for some really great story ideas. When I talk about animation on this channel, I don't often use the term groundbreaking, even when I bring up some of my favorite shows of all time. But Infinity Train is definitely a show that I see as groundbreaking. Not just for Cartoon Network, not just for HBO, but for Western animation in general. This is a show that was built from the ground up to show off the possibilities and potential of mainstream maturity in Western animation. Not only by using the infinitely imaginative world they've created to show off metaphorical depictions of real struggles, but also by showing these kinds of struggles wholesale and treating them with all the respect and realism that they deserve. We've seen multi-layered takes on identity and reality, realistic handling of sad situations, irredeemable characters, tragic events that can't be undone, visual representations of internal struggles, peaks and valleys of character progression and regression, all of which use metaphorical imagery and upfront conflict in tandem to make the sentiment stronger. And despite what the executive heads may say, I feel like this is maturity that can be accessible to any age demographic, because everyone has gone through these things or eventually will in the future. I'm not saying there haven't been other cartoons that have taken on mature themes and done them well, that would be a stupid statement. But Infinity Train is the first show I've seen in a while that embodies these kinds of themes to its core. Its very structure and premise is designed to take a step inside the minds of characters. And with how complex and beyond words the human mind can be, the possibilities are literally infinite. And this show uses the medium of animation to its fullest to prove how true that statement is. If there's anyone that could make a good case for further maturity in TV animation, it's Owen Dennis. And I feel that Infinity Train could have the potential to go on for as long as he wanted it to, if the higher-ups only agreed with me. For now, I'm still willing to hold out for a little bit longer, because all this cancellation talk is still just speculation. We have no final word from the creator or the companies yet, so I'm gonna wait for an actual announcement from Owen's Twitter or Network Upfront or something official. If the show does end up dying, then consider this video to be a swan song for a really great series and a tribute to a man who had ideas that most people weren't ready for. And I cannot stress this enough, if you haven't seen Infinity Train yet, please go watch it. Even if it's too late to save the show like people were hoping, it's still a fantastic piece of art on its own, and if you love animation like I do, it's completely worth checking out and supporting. Stream it on HBO Max, buy the digital releases on iTunes. Heck, go use the HBO Max 7-day free trial if you ain't got the dough. And if you've already seen it, show some love in other ways. Go buy some merch, go stream the soundtrack, go to the social media of Owen and the crew and give them some encouragement or comfort, because they really deserve it. Tell them what the show really meant to you or what it taught you. Show them that despite what the numbers or charts may say, this show spoke to an audience that is literally infinite. Infinite in numbers, infinite in backgrounds, infinite in ages, and infinite in perspectives. And look, even if it does get the axe, not all hope is lost. I mean, if shows like Clone High can come back after being presumed dead for almost 2 decades, I see no reason why Infinity Train couldn't make a comeback someday as well, especially if tons of people keep demanding it. Best of luck with the future, Mr. Dennis, if you're somehow watching this, and even if this is the show's last stop, I hope your train of creativity keeps on chugging. One of the best aspects of this show is its twists and turns. 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 Oh! Okay. I didn't see that coming, but great! Congrats, Mr. Dennis. High five? No? It just... Alright. Yeah. I don't know what to say. Just... Alright. Alright, right? Yeah, I'll see you in book 4.